Okay, we are live on another edition of the Edlow Podcast. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. We are back with Nolan Jones on this new edition, this new kind of segment, I guess you could say, of the podcast, Lawyer's Corner. Nolan, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back. It was a blast last time. Ready to get into some stuff.
Yeah, so we decided, just for those who are listening now, that about once a month or so, we're going to come on here and we're going to kind of answer some questions about different areas of law, or at least the different aspects of what we do. And we thought this time what we would start with is, I think we both get a lot of phone calls from people who are either in law school or prospective law students who just have questions about the process. And so we thought maybe we take some time today and just kind of go over stuff for both prospective law students and then those who are in law school trying to figure out what they want to do. Nolan, when you have these conversations, what are some of is there anything that you find to be the kind of most common question for, say, let's start with prospective law students?
So, prospective law students, I think you're thinking of people who are still in their undergrad. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, I've had actually both. I've had some people, I'm heavily involved in my kids' school that's a K through 12, and sometimes the high school students, I'll go to like a career fair or whatever, and they'll have questions too. But maybe you could tell me what you see most from these types of prospective law students.
Yeah, I would say that there's no clear path that you need to take in order to get into law school or to, have a good career after law school. Um, I'm a good example for that. I did not know I wanted to go to law school until 2 years after I graduated my undergrad. What's helpful is that you don't need any kind of particular major to go to law school. I changed my major probably 5 or 6 times. When I first started, I wanted to be an accountant. I got relatively bored of math classes, so then I decided to move to like a medical background, either a doctor or psychologist or a nurse. I took all of the prereqs to become a nurse, and then realized that the program at Sacramento State where I went was very impacted and almost impossible to get into. So I
Mhm.
decided to shift, and I had already taken a bunch of philosophy classes because they just interested me.
Yeah.
Um, so I finished that out. It was only like 9 more units I needed to take to graduate. So I got a major and a minor, a major in philosophy of logic and then a minor in biology. And I only point that out because they are not law classes at all. They're not pre-law or anything like that. A lot of schools don't have a pre-law other than like a club. So it's just
Sure.
my philosophy when I was in undergrad was to take classes that interested me and then figure out what I wanted to do later. I don't know if that's the best advice, but the logic classes did actually help me quite a bit on the LSAT, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit. But I think the
Yeah,
main
that was actually the question I had for you. That's an interesting. I took a couple of classes that were just logic classes. They just kind of fit my prereqs for what I was doing.
Mhm.
And I thought those were super helpful when it came to taking the LSAT.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I took logic and like advanced logic and symbolic logic or something like that. So there are 3 different logic classes in undergrad. I had no plans for what I was going to use them for, but it turns out that I think a quarter of the LSAT is logic based, and like the other
Yeah.
3/4 are reading comprehension, if I recall. But that was super helpful. So for me, and I'm kind of maybe skipping forward past undergrad, but when you study for the LSAT, I just took a couple of practice exams and I felt pretty well prepared, but I've talked to a lot of people who they take classes in order to study
Yeah.
for the LSAT, and it helps a lot. But I would say if you're still in your undergrad taking some of those classes based in logic, they help a lot just in basic life skills.
Sure.
But if you're thinking about law school, they're very helpful for actually doing well on the LSAT exam.
What I find really interesting about that is when I even here on the podcast or when I'm having discussions with people about various different things in life, it is actually quite fascinating how many people are just not trained in logic. It's kind of surprising, and it's not like a knock on anybody. Just when making a to B logical connection is actually quite hard for some people, and it's kind of interesting. So taking those classes, you're right, it does help in life skills. Interestingly, my law clerk just went to the LSAT. Are you aware that they took away logic games?
They did? Oh, that's
Yeah.
good.
That was the one that the funny thing about that is I found that that was where you could make the most improvement. You know what
Absolutely.
I mean? Like, because I did what you said, excuse me, what you said about taking a course. I did. I took a course through Test Masters, and, they guarantee a 12-point increase, or they say on average, people get a 12-point increase. That was not my experience, but I was kinda testing a little bit higher anyway. Um, so I think that the reason that's the average is because if you're going in there and you're testing at the 40th or 30th percentile, you can increase significantly and get up there. I think I was testing on my practice test, like at a 155, 156, and ended up with a 163 by taking it. And that was I would have gotten into, we both went to McGeorge right here in Sacramento, University of the Pacific, McGeorge School of Law. I would have gotten in anyway, but the increase in my LSAT, allowed me to get significant scholarship money from that. So it did cost a bit. It was like $1,200 and it was a time commitment. They probably, I'm sure, do it. This is 100 years ago. So, I mean, that was before Zoom was a big thing. So it was all in person. I'm sure they have an online course now that people are taking. But, it ended up at the time, this is in 2007, I think is when I took it. It was like $1,200. I'm sure it's more expensive now, but the increase in the scholarship money I got made it well worth it. So, so I definitely encourage anybody, if they really wanna get into competitive law school, that you do that.
Yeah, I if I had it to do over again, because I wasn't even sure I wanted to go to law school when I took the LSAT,
Yeah.
my mom said, "Hey, you, argue with me all the time. Why don't you go, law school?" And I was like, "Oh, I'll take the LSAT, we'll see what happens." So I didn't take it super seriously, but if I had realized that I was gonna be doing this as a career at some point in time, I probably would have taken the classes and then studied for it. Like, looking back on it, when you study for the bar exam, for example, everyone takes a course for that, or at least you should, absolutely should, and you treat it like a job. If I would've done the same for the LSAT, I probably would have increased my score even more. And I same as you, McGeorge was giving out scholarships back then, and I really appreciated that. Would have been nice for it to be a bit higher, but, it
Yeah.
was still very helpful because I did pretty well in the LSAT also.
Yeah. So those are some tips, and I agree with you in that there's no clear path. Sometimes one of the questions I get when I get people who are specifically, well, both really, people in high school who are thinking about going to law school, or even people who are in their undergrad thinking about going to law school, they always ask, well, what should my major be? And it really doesn't matter. I mean, it could be anything. I knew people in my law school class who had theater majors that were that had gone to law school. Um, I personally chose, it was called the government major at the time. It's now the political science major. Um, and the benefit to doing that at Sacramento State was they they didn't have a lot of required courses. It was like the required courses were rather small. They did well, I should say they had a lot of units required, but there weren't any that were specific to the major. You were able to go outside and do other things. So I was allowed to take a lot of classes and things that I was interested in. And also the one thing that was good about the political science major was there's a lot of debate, a lot of reading, and a lot of writing required. So in some ways, it kinda helped you prepare to go to law school. Now, my experience in Sac State was there was absolutely nothing that I ever did that was gonna prepare me for the difficulty of the reading and writing, the Socratic method that you found in law school. But it was helpful to have something that was a little more writing and reading intensive. And then also, like I said, I mean, I think that there's just naturally a debate component to it that helps, that I thought was helpful for when I got to law school. Because when you get to law school, it's a different method. There is nobody waiting for people to raise their hands. It's all Socratic method. They're calling you. they're calling on you. You have to be prepared. You really, unless you're a savant, like you really have to keep up on the reading. I don't know about your experience. I assume it's similar to mine, where um, you could realistically go to undergrad, not really do the reading, kind of really pay attention in class and take good notes, and probably pass the class. Um, and, you know, or even go to the office hours. I mean, I was shocked when I started going to office hours and they were literally telling me what to put in my papers to get A's. I mean, and then I went to the office hour in law school and it was not that way. It's, so, those are some things, that I recommend. The other thing is if you do have a pre-law advisor on campus, you should definitely go and talk to whoever that is. You went to Sac State, right, Nolan?
Yeah, I went to Sac State and, some classes that I think are helpful. Because like you just said, the major I don't think is super important, but it is important to have a major that lets you take some various courses that are not, you're not so locked in to certain things that you need. So just English classes, like writing intensive English classes, I think are helpful for your legal writing. Even though it's a different style of writing, I think that practice helps a lot. Philosophy or logic classes I already talked about are very helpful. Uh, Government, criminal justice, history, those types of classes I think can be helpful, particularly with some classes like constitutional law and stuff like that that you'll see in law school. I think it's helpful to have a background in some of those, but
Mhm.
I did terrible in constitutional law, so what do I know? And then and you mentioned theater, I think that's a great point because if you're gonna be in trial, being able to speak in front of people is a big thing for it, and even in law school, because a lot of teachers use the Socratic method and they're calling on you in class, you need to be comfortable talking in front of people, so I think theater, communications, different classes like that where you're doing speeches or debates or things, I think could be very helpful.
Yeah, in fact, with some of the extra, classes I had, I took a bunch of acting classes, theater class. I took, because I knew I wanted to be a trial attorney, so I was like, "I wanna get up in front of people as much as I can." And so, I ended up taking acting 1, 2, and 3, and then children's theater. And so I was the big bad wolf in a children's play, which is pretty awesome. My kids were still really young, so they got to come and watch, and they thought that was pretty funny and still talk about it. But, I agree. I mean, those types of things, just getting used if you wanna be a trial attorney, getting used to being in front of people and doing things like that, because there is a performative element to trial work. So, if you can get into that, it's super helpful. Um, you know, uh, as far as what would you think your we talked a little bit about preparing for the LSAT, but how was that for you, taking the LSAT? How did that feel? It's funny because right now I cannot remember any test other than the bar. But, but, like, what was your experience of taking the LSAT?
So I think I took the LSAT at Lincoln Law School.
Mhm.
Um, I don't remember a whole lot of the test. I remember I took one practice exam, on the computer in my house, and I got a really good score on it, so, like, "Okay, I guess I'll take the real thing." So then I signed up for it, and then, I've always been a pretty good test taker, so I was pretty confident going into it. The logic portion was the last part, if I remember correctly, and some of the logic things actually threw me, so maybe I should have prepared a bit more for it because that should have been my slam dunk area, but I remember getting stuck on 1 or 2 of them, which took my time down on a few of the others. I don't love reading, even though we have to do it for work, like, every day.
Yeah, it's pretty
Um,
much all we do.
yeah, so I'm not a super fast reader, and so, a lot of it was reading comprehension. So I was, like, running out of time on the reading comprehension sections, and then, I had to speed through some of the logic, but I did well on it. I think I got a 168 or something like that.
Oh, nice. That's like
So
shoot, man, that's like what, 90th percentile, 92nd
yeah,
percentile? That's high.
it was a good score, but then I I really only applied to McGeorge anyway because I wanted to go to night school. So,
Right.
uh, so it is what it is. But yeah, that's all I really remember for it. I don't remember how long it takes you to get your results back. I remember I took it 2 years after I graduated undergrad, and I was working at restaurants at the time, and Wasn't sure really what I wanted to do. So this was just, hey, let's test it out, see if this is something that could be a way forward for me. So that was
Yeah.
my experience.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. We could talk more about choosing law schools, and so I would I found it really interesting. I was really stressed out about it because unlike you, I kind of banked everything on going to law school. I worked full time. I had a family, working through. I got married really young. Um, and that, um, so that was it was really a stressful time, and it was really interesting. I wish I had been like looking back now, easy to say hindsight. I shouldn't have been so stressed about it. Um, but I walked in there and there were people. I took it in Reno. I signed up late, and when I took it in Reno, there were people. I went up and stayed the night before. If you're going to do it out of town, I highly recommend you go the night before. Rent a hotel room, relax the night before. I did not study the day before at all. I just took kind of a break and relaxed. Got away from the kids and just kind of, slept and then showed up the next morning because it does start early. But when I got there in the morning, there were people in the bathroom like throwing up. They were that nervous about it. And I just was kind of like, wow, this is pretty intense. And so, um, yeah, I mean, I would say for the LSAT, as long as you prepare and push hard, especially if you take one of those courses, as long as you do all the work, I ended up performing better on the actual LSAT than I did in any practice test I took.
Oh,
So, like I said, I kind of looking back, I wish I would have taken a little more, been a little less stressed. I think I would have probably even done better if I wasn't so stressed out about it. So maybe that was part of the reason why you didn't have, you weren't really even sure you wanted to go to law school. So maybe that made it a little bit easier for you.
maybe, yeah. I think stress can really affect your ability to perform well on tests, and I, I don't know how you tell people not to be stressed because that just makes them more stressed out. But
Yeah.
if you could be less, if you could be less stressed, that's to your advantage for sure.
Well, I think if you're somebody who does stress about test taking, then taking one of those courses is so much more important for you. I mean, because they will show you how all of it works, and it's much better that way. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about. So you got somebody, they've got they've gotten their LSAT results, they do okay. How did you go about? I mean, you mentioned you only applied to one law school, but how did how would you recommend somebody, um, choose a law school?
That's a good question. So for me, I had to choose a law school that had a night school component, just because um, I needed to work during the day in order to pay for it.
Yeah,
Uh, but I mean, if you're choosing a law school just in general, I think you want to kind of have an idea of what you think you want to do, and that may change. When I decided I wanted to go to law school, one of the reasons why I liked McGeorge is there's a sports agent named Scott Boris, and I wanted to be a sports agent, but Scott Boris went to McGeorge Law School, so I was like, oh, if you went there and became a sports agent, I can go there and I could do the kind of the same thing. And ultimately, I
mhm,
decided to do something different, but um, that was one of the reasons that I kind of convinced myself that McGeorge would be a good place for me. Um, the I think just looking at the ranking, because the law school rankings, there's a ranking system of schools in general, but I think they also have a rankings based on the different types of programs. So like
mhm,
if you want to be a trial lawyer, for example, there's trial advocacy programs, and there's a ranking of what are the best ones in the country, and there's similar things for other areas of law. So I would just look into the specific category that interests you, and make sure you're going to a school that matches up with you. Because
yeah,
I mean, it doesn't. You may go to a great school, but they're not good in the one area that you particularly want to practice in, and then I don't think it's going to actually help you. It may be good for a resume, but it's not going to necessarily make you good at being a lawyer.
yeah, yeah. I had a little bit of a different experience. I, um, I was deciding whether I wanted to do an evening division or a day division. It would have been very hard for me to do a day division because like you, I was working all the way through. I actually had a my goal was to go to Notre Dame Law School. So I had gotten, you know, recommendations from other Notre Dame law school like professors and stuff who'd been there. I had, I'd taken all the classes that I felt I needed that would get me there. I actually had ties there because I served a church mission in the last 7 months. I was on Notre Dame campus, so I thought that was going to help me. But then ultimately, um, I looked into Notre Dame, and then I looked into I actually got scholarships and uh, people were interested in actually, if you get good enough grades and you're following their certain percentiles, you actually end up, um, they'll 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 invite you to come and pay a flight for you to come and take a look at it. And so I looked at Seton Hall Law School, I looked at Pepperdine, I looked at Tulare, um, and I was looking at Notre Dame and Arizona State, and then of course McGeorge. And of all of those, I wanted to go to McGeorge the least, even though I was here from Sacramento, just because, nobody outside of Sacramento really even knows where that is, right? Um, but the thing that I found really fascinating is, like, I went to Seton Hall. It's in Newark, New Jersey, but it's a really nice closed campus. It's really kind of a cool spot. Really liked it a lot. But then when I talked to them, they said, "Well, where do you want to end up?" And I said, "Well, I ultimately want to end up back up in Sacramento in California where my family is." And they were like, "Yeah, most of the people end up in New York. All of our connections are in the eastern on the East Coast. So we have a few out in there, but they're LA and San Francisco." And so the person who was kind of the person in charge of walking me around and showing me, she was just like, "Yeah, if I were you, I probably wouldn't come here." Because you're just not gonna get the connections that you would at some of the other, places you were talking about. And so, the other thing that I think if I were gonna recommend somebody look at it is, you should definitely go where the money is. And what I mean by that is if you got somewhere offering you a full ride scholarship, you should probably go there. The student loan debt in law school is very high. And, I know some attorneys who, are 15 years in still paying them off, you know, so that's another thing I would recommend is if you have an opportunity to go somewhere that's gonna be a little bit cheaper, and has what you were saying about the area you wanna practice in, then that might be a pretty strong consideration. And then, of course, if they have evening divisions, like I ultimately went to McGeorge. It was interesting. I did all these tours, and I ended up on McGeorge campus for whatever reason, that just felt right. It just felt right to me to be there. And I just said, "Yeah, I'm just gonna kinda go with my gut," and it worked out, you know? So I didn't get I kinda liked the Notre Dame because I was like, "Oh, it's Notre Dame. Everybody knows where Notre Dame is. I'll feel kinda good about myself because I went to Notre Dame," and so going to McGeorge, I kinda the pride and ego in me was kinda like, I coulda gone to Pepperdine or Notre Dame. I didn't go to Pepperdine because it was so expensive. Like, it was beautiful, but man, it was so expensive to go. Um, and so, yeah, that's how I ended up there, and then I ended up doing the evening division, and that worked out. Evening divisions take 4 years, other than 3. Did you do the 3.5 or did you do 4?
I did 3.5. Yeah, I took a lot of
Okay,
summer school classes, and then I feel like I jammed 1 extra class in during a semester somehow to get to 3.5.
and working here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
that's a tough go.
And then so, going back to the choosing a law school, what are your thoughts? Because there's law schools that have all the United States accreditation, and there's other law schools that only have California accreditation, and we work with people who have both. And what we do, it doesn't particularly matter, as long as you're gonna be practicing only in California. If you go
Yeah.
to, like, Lincoln, which is much less expensive, but,
Mhm.
if you're not sure what you wanna do, I think that going to a school that has national accreditation is important. What do you think?
Yeah, so there have been a number of times where I mean, some of our colleagues and partners, they went to Lincoln, and they did not have the loan, uh, the loan debt that we had coming out,
Sure.
and that was super frustrating to have to pay that. And also, I chose McGeorge over Lincoln mainly because, first of all, with the scholarship, it wasn't it wasn't that much more expensive. But I thought, well, what if I want to move out of state? There maybe at some point I might want to move out of state, and I don't want anything blocking that. And so if you feel that way, if you feel like there's a chance that you want to move out of state, or maybe if you're somebody who is coming to McGeorge from another state, your family somewhere else, I wouldn't go to Lincoln then. But if you have no desire to leave California or Sacramento, your family's all here, uh, I would I the people who went to Lincoln or here are just as good a lawyers as we are. I mean, I feel like I'm the best, but I mean, like, they're they're formidable attorneys and they're better than anybody, a lot of the people who went to McGeorge. Wouldn't you
Right.
agree?
Yeah, I would agree with you. Well, Chris Wood went to Lincoln, didn't he? And he's
Yeah.
one of the best. He won Attorney of the Year last year, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, that's right. He's one of the best attorneys in the state. And, that's another thing that, and this would maybe a good, um, segue into law school. And also, but I even say this to people in college, um, law school can get very competitive. Um, Everybody's interested in their class rank. They literally rank you 1 to whatever the bottom number is in your class. And so,
And
people
your scholarships are based on that ranking a lot of the times, right? If you
yeah, yeah.
go ahead and keep it anyway.
Yeah, I had to, keep in the top, I think 50% or something like that to be able to keep my scholarship, right? So that's a little stressful. But the thing that I think is so interesting is I just remember being so stressed about that, and so stressed even in college, being stressed about my GPA, and now being out, I'm in my 13th year, I think, as an attorney. I don't think I've ever had anyone ask me what my GPA was in law school. I got, whatever the trainer society or whatever, top 25%. Nobody cares. I got certificates in trial advocacy. I got the Witkin in the trial ad and advanced trial ad class. Nobody has ever asked about any of that, you know? And so when I have like a lot of the law clerks I've had over the years have been law students, and occasionally I'll have one come in and say, yeah, I'm thinking about doing, moot court, or I'm thinking about getting on law review. I just want to pad my resume. And I just go, yeah, I wouldn't recommend you do any of that. I I would recommend you just, if you want to just get as much practical application as you can, because in my view, none of that stuff really makes you a good advocate or attorney. I mean, what do you think, Nolan?
Yeah, I think all of those things are good for a resume for getting your first job out of law school. And then if you then anything after that, no one's going to care whatsoever. And even with those things, it might just put you slightly above someone else, but you still have to interview for the position, and you still
Yeah.
got to make a good impression at the interview, which I think is more important. So, yeah, I mean, I did. I remember in law school, I did all of the trial advocacy classes to try and get the
Mhm,
trial advocacy certificate, but
mhm,
I didn't take a an internship, which was part of it. I worked
mhm.
here for 3.5 years, or 3 years, and
And it
I
didn't count. That was so frustrating, wasn't it?
yeah, so that counts in order to graduate, but it doesn't count for the purposes of the certification. So I had like a long argument with the professors over at Georgia.
I did the same thing.
They would
Yeah.
not give me the certificate. It was extremely frustrating. And now nobody cares about that at all. It'd be cool to have another piece of paper on my wall, but uh, but I mean, yeah, there's other awards and papers you can get and put up there, like the ones you got behind you up there. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it doesn't really matter that much.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because I had the same argument with the same professor that you had. And, I actually did go and do the internship over the summer. I was able to work my schedule here to where I could come in late a couple of days and then also work on Saturdays so that way I could get the requisite hours over the whole summer to cover the time. And, so I went and did an externship at the Sutter DA's office, which was invaluable experience because it did confirm for me that I didn't want to do that. I thought that that's what, because when I went to law school, excuse me, I thought I wanted to be a prosecutor. I wanted to put bad guys in jail. That's, I saw a lot of lot of Law& and Order and My Cousin Vinny and all those, and I was like, I wanna be one of those guys, and I know they went to trial all the time, so that's what I wanted to do. And then I had an opportunity to do it, and, I ended up, doing prelims for a lot of domestic violence cases,
Mm.
and very much turned me off to the process of being prosecutor. The people who do that, more power to them. They put in a ton of work. They do not get paid enough, especially the public defenders. Those those poor people are overworked and underpaid. Um, but I just knew that wasn't something I wanted to do. Um, and so, but anyway, I got the certificate, and again, nobody, I didn't really need it. You know what I mean? Like looking back now, I spent a lot of time stressing about that, and nobody cares about it. So, uh, so yeah, I think that if I were gonna talk to somebody about being in law school and what they should do with their extracurricular time, I would say for the purposes of a longevity in your career, it would be find a job in what you wanna do and try to get as much practical application experience as you can. Because you probably had a very similar experience to me in that we got a lot of practical experience here, and then I took the classes like civil pretrial litigation, trial advocacy, mediations and settlements and negotiations. I took all of those practical application classes, and I think even if I didn't work here, those would have been hugely beneficial for me. I think being here and working here actually made me so much better in those classes when I got to them. Did you have a similar experience?
Yeah, I think that, you maybe need a different guest than me on these shows because we have the same experience, so it's just an echo chamber. But but I think, because we both had the same experience that we worked at this firm, so very prestigious firm, and the attorneys who are our mentors, were doing it for years and years, and if we were to go someplace else right after law school, if we didn't get the job here that we both got, and we applied in other places, I think that on a resume or in an interview, mentioning that we had the 3 years here, working under the people we worked under, that would have made a better impression on the hiring attorney at this other firm than a certificate that we got in law school or, a Witkin award or something in some class. I think that the work experience would probably be better on a resume. I think, uh you want to do your best in law school, but the main thing is to graduate and then make sure you do well on the bar so you can pass it.
Yeah, 100%,
But
100%.
I felt that working so we talked about this the last time I was on, but prior to working here, I had never worked in an office at all. So my big thing was I need to get some experience working in an office while I'm in law school, because if I go into the job market after law school and I've got 0 experience whatsoever working even in an office, let alone in the law, nobody's gonna want anything to do with me. It's gonna be really hard to
Yeah,
get that first job. So that's
yeah,
why I started working, at a law firm during school. I was probably making less money than I was at the restaurants I was working at before, but it was, important in order to get my shoe in the door.
yeah. Yeah, and that's something that, we do have the similar experience, but I think it does translate to anywhere because, even though we do feel like our firm is prestigious and the best game in town, it's not the only place that you can get the experience.
Sure.
There's lots of places you can. And I think that that's so much more important. In fact, I remember, I don't think I ever told anybody here this, but when I was doing when I first started doing the prosecution thing, there was a public defender that I kind of befriended during some of the prelims. I kept having prelims with this guy, and he was rather impressed um, that I was doing so well considering that I had just been there and I was only working like 12 hours a week. And he was like, "Where how is it that you're, doing this? It can't be just like natural because this isn't natural." And I go, "No, I work for Dreyer Babich," and I explained, I was like, "Yeah, I'm Roger Dreyer's law clerk, and so I've videotaped and summarized about 100 depots at this point, So I've seen how to cross-examine somebody 100 times. And he goes, "Oh, well, what are you doing here?" And I go, "Well, I don't know. I mean, there's part because I was thinking this at the time. I was thinking, well, maybe it would be better for me to take a year or two and just get a bunch of trial experience as prosecutor, and then maybe see if I could come back or maybe go somewhere else and get back into civil litigation if I decided that maybe prosecution was not the right way to go." And when I told this public defender that, he looked at me and he goes, "Are you crazy?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "If you have an opportunity to work for a seasoned trial attorney and he's willing to teach you how to do it, you don't leave that." Right?
Sure.
And I go, "Okay, that makes sense." And so if you have an opportunity, that really had an impact on me because and I would tell somebody the same thing is if you have the opportunity to go and actually work in the law, there's nothing maybe you had a different experience, but I feel like if I hadn't had this job here, I've come out of law school having no idea how to practice law. I mean, it's good with concepts, it's good with teaching you how to think a certain way, but as far as practical application for being an attorney, law school really doesn't do much of that.
Yeah, it was, like, in trial advocacy and, some of the other classes when we had to do practical applications of things, I felt like I really excelled in school at that stuff because I'd seen it done here and participated in it here. Like, I remember I took a discovery class, written discovery, and when we were clerks, that was our main that was our bag,
Yeah, that's
written
what we
discovery.
did. Yeah.
So I took that class and people didn't understand the concept of written discovery really because they hadn't done it before, and I was like, "Oh, this is the
Mhm.
easiest class I've ever done." So it helps with some things. In some ways, working, here while going to school there was confusing because, we're doing California law here, and, like, Georgia, you're learning the federal system, and so there are some inconsistencies that make it a little bit confusing. Um, if you are a day student, which neither of us were, but if you're a day student, I think it's important to do some kind of externships, working somewhere, or even if it's just a summer thing. I
Yeah.
think it's important to get some kind of experience. So, because the university, the law school doesn't give you everything that you need. It gives you a lot of the information, but you don't really learn at all how to apply it. I don't think, other than maybe one or two classes.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's important to do as
Yeah.
a thing at the same time.
One thing I did like about McGeorge, not that I ever felt like I would sell McGeorge to anyone, but, uh, one thing I did appreciate about McGeorge was that it did make us, as a required course, take every single subject that would be on the bar.
Yeah.
So, that was helpful because you never know what you're gonna get. You get 6 of the 14 subjects, you don't know which ones. So, so I think that was helpful. If I'm not mistaken, McGeorge does still have one of the higher bar passing rates in California, which is pretty, at least did when we were there, which I also thought was, made it a great choice for, taking the California bar exam. What else, did you have any, what recommendations would you have, Nolan, for someone who's still trying to figure out what kind of law they're gonna do?
Well, I think that's why you take different classes, while you're in school to try and get a different feel for things that you think you might be interested in. So I think that's helpful. If you work at a place while you're in school and you see the practical side of it and you determine that's not something you're interested in, then that's a good sign that maybe you want to get a job while in school someplace else and maybe study some other classes. Like if I didn't like it, like the cases that we were working on when I was a clerk really interested me. So it kind of, this was not something I had planned to be doing as a career, but I ended up really liking it. So I stayed here. But if I didn't like it, I probably would have tried, going to an employment firm or you know, looking into sports agencies or something like that, something
Mhm,
different, after I realized I didn't like it. So,
mhm,
but that didn't happen to me. And I think similar to undergrad, where you just want to sample different classes, like we were talking about earlier, a broad sampling of different topics can be helpful in everyday life, but it's also helpful for getting into law school. The same applies with law school classes. Do a broad sampling of different topics until you find one that you really connect with, and then follow up on that one till it's time to graduate.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a similar experience. Like I said earlier, I wanted to be a prosecutor, and then, I just by happenstance got the job here and just really took to it, really enjoyed it. And so, if you had told me before I got the job that I would end up being a partner in a personal injury law firm, I would have said, "Forget it, I'll just go get an MBA," because it didn't interest me in the least. But it has ended up being, the most rewarding job I could ever have. Now, I've also had colleagues who came here and got tried the law clerk position, and it just wasn't for them. I mean, there were, it I think, Nolan, you came into the tail end of the similar experience that I had where we kinda churned and burned through a lot of law clerks because it was a very demanding job, very rewarding job, but it taught you really fast whether this is something you could or did want to do. Um, I think you need to get a job like that and kinda just get an opportunity to see it. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I think so. Um, and it's easier to do when you have a night class, but of course, night school is longer than day school. So that just yeah, getting some kind of practical experience, whether it's like a 6 week externship or an actual job or whatever, and just to get the practical real world experience is, I think, more important than some of the classes in some ways.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing is I think one class I took that I thought was incredibly invaluable for me, there was a class that I was able to take that was the business of law firms, like teaching you how to start your own firm if you wanted to, creating a business plan for it, what you should look for, the name of a firm, how you can ethically name your firm, things like that, which I think was really helpful, even though, I ultimately didn't go and start my own firm, that I stayed at this law firm and became a partner here. Something like that's also really, helpful if you decide, "Hey, I wanna hang my own shingle." A lot of people do that and are very rewarded for that, really enjoy that. So, um, uh, the other thing I would say for people who are starting out law school, and that is that, I wouldn't say, um and this maybe goes for just in general, your education in general, is I would not get super hung up on the end result. And I think it's more focusing on the journey of going through it and enjoying that part of it. Now I'm a different breed. I really do enjoy building things. I mean, like building a career, building a practice, building, a resume, building a podcast, I kind of actually enjoy that process. But I think, if you get too married to the end result, you might end up losing perspective on what you should be grateful for because, everything that I've ever done, including law, uh, looks I've been successful in a number of things, but it all looks way different than I thought it was gonna look when I started. And, like, a perfect example is I thought a prosecutor, I came out as a personal injury attorney, and that was not on my bingo card, you know? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's important. While you're there, focus on what you're doing and make sure you're enjoying the experience and make it the most you can make it instead of thinking too far ahead. Um, One thing you mentioned, the business of law class you took, and I didn't learn about this until after I was out of law school, but they have those concurrent degrees where you can get an MBA with a JD. If I know about that back then, that would have been fun to do, I think, and it'd be cool to have that experience. But that's another maybe a topic for another podcast.
Yeah.
but uh, but I agree with you. Yeah, whatever you're working on, you look back on it 10 years later, and it's going to look different than you had expected it to look while you were doing it. So, like where you and I are talking about things that were 10 to 15 years ago when we were clerks and stuff like that, and while we were doing it, it seemed extremely hectic and all that stuff. But I think it really shapes the way you are going forward, and all you can really do is focus on it while you're in it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, uh Another thing that I think that's important to know, particularly about law school, is because I talk to high school students a lot. I end up doing the career fair every year at my kids' school, and they always come up to me and they go, how many years did it take you to get through school?" And I worked full time the whole way through, so I was like, "About 9 years." It took about 5 to get through my undergrad, and then it took 4 for me to get through law school. And they're like, "Wow, 9 years of school," and they're 11th graders or 12th graders, so that seems like their whole career, right?
Right.
And, but when you get to be older, you're in your 40s and you look back, you realize that time is gonna pass anyway, and so I would say, understand that law school to me was not as much as it's a strain, intellectually, but it's really more of a war of attrition, you know? We lose, at least my class lost probably a third of our class in the first semester, and then another 10% at the end of the year. And I think we started with 110 students and ended with, like, 45 when we graduated.
Well,
And
that's how McGeorge keeps those bar pass rates really high because they only graduate the ones who are gonna pass.
yeah, right, right. But I mean, but the thing was that a lot of the people who quit, they just didn't realize how significant it was gonna be, or something in their life came up that they didn't think they could dedicate the time. And I can tell you that if you can get through it, if you could get through law school, jokingly, someone said that all law school is like a 3 or 4 year hazing, before they let you into the fraternity. And, there's, like, something to that, because if you can get through that, you can get through being a lawyer, working the long hours and the stress of that. I mean, any thoughts on that, Nolan?
Yeah, especially for both of our experience while we were in law school, it was really taxing because you're working 9 to 5, and then you've got school from 6 to 9, and then you go to sleep, and then you do the same thing the next day. So it's
Yeah.
really a challenge, especially depending on, how the classes are stacked, while you're in school working at the same time. But, yeah, I think, when I was in high school, part of the reason I didn't wanna be a doctor or a lawyer was because it's 8, 9, 10 years of school, and I couldn't fathom that. I wanted to go to school as little as I could, get done with it, and
Mhm.
then move on. Um, so that was part of the reason why I wanted to go into accounting out of high school and, into college. It didn't seem like as long of a trajectory as going to law school or medical school. But, I mean, it flies by, and then, 4 years in comparison to, the rest of your life, 60, 70 or more years is a very small portion.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's an investment in your future. I think if it's something that interests you, don't let the amount of time be a detractor.
Yeah, and I'd also say, I joke with some of the law students that, or one of the potential law students that call me. I go, "All right, I'm gonna do everything I can to convince you not to do it, and if I can't convince you, you're probably gonna be a good lawyer," you know? And, I think that that's true. I think that law, it takes a certain breed to be able to get through it, but if you can, I mean, you're gonna be successful. Um, and I agree with you. I remember while I was going through it, the days were long, but the weeks were short. So, like, next thing I knew, I'd blink and I'd be done with my first year, and then I was halfway through, and then next thing graduation's right around the corner, and you're
Right.
looking at the bar. And now I look back, and I've been in practice for 13 years, and I go, "Man, I it doesn't seem that long ago, but it flies. Every year flies faster." So it's a rewarding career. The other thing I would say as far as being a lawyer, I think that one thing's important is that, if you're looking for something to just make money, there's a lot of ways to do that. But if you actually believe in being an attorney, like, you believe in helping people, you believe that you wanna do it, uh, then if you have a passion for the law, then you absolutely should do it. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense. If it's something you're passionate about, don't let the time be a factor because you'll have a lot more time doing something you love. than you would have doing something you weren't so crazy about. So if you're passionate about it,
Yeah.
it's a short ramp.
Yeah. And it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy what I do. I mean, there's a competitive nature to it. It feels like, it's like a human game of risk sometimes. You're just, you're really it's strategy games and it's a lot of fun. And you get to help people who can't help themselves. So,
Right.
pretty good pretty good stuff.
What do you I mean, we've talked about undergrad, we've talked about law school and working while in law school. What about the bar exam? Should we touch on that a little bit?
Oh, yeah, taking the bar?
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
mean, it's so we talked a lot about managing school with work and how difficult that can be. I did not even attempt to manage work with studying for the bar exam. I treated studying for the bar exam like it was my job for 3 months. Um, was your experience? I mean, I assume you did the same thing. You took off
Yeah.
work for those 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, in fact, when I spoke with, the powers that be here about maybe working part-time or something, they were like, "Absolutely not." They're like, "Absolutely not. You have to focus on the bar. You're not gonna be able to make it. You would be." And quite frankly, it's 10 weeks, right? Like, when you're in it, it seems like a lot of time, but then when you're out of it, now it was fine, got through it. You know what I mean? But yeah, I would not do anything other than focus on the bar.
And I've never been a big studier. I didn't study for tests really in undergrad or not. So I mean, I did somewhat for law school, but not a ton. But for the bar exam, like I treat it like a 9 to 5. I woke up, got my coffee and breakfast or whatever. I do some classes, like some of the bar prep classes in the morning, take a lunch break, do my bar prep classes in the afternoon, and then be done with it, and then just kind of relax and clear my mind for the rest of the night. And I do that 5 days a week, and then take off the weekends. But if you do that consistently, just like you're getting into some kind of exercise program or anything like that, once you start to be consistent about it, then it becomes easy. Where people falter, I think, for bar prep is when they start too late and then they try and cram everything in
Mm,
the last month or month and a half. And you feel like you've got plenty of time. You're 3 months out or you're 2 months out. You're like, I've got plenty of time to study for this thing. And it's just so much information that you can't take it all in and remember it. So you need to repeat it. So, I mean, I used Barbary. I know there's other ones too. And I'm
yeah.
not speaking for any of them in particular, but they all have a schedule that I think it's very important that you follow it because it's
Mm,
hopefully your first and only time ever taking this test and you don't really know what to expect. So if you can just follow the schedule, uh, I think it's actually not as hard as people make it out to be. But if you don't study for it, it's almost impossible.
yeah, so, I took Barbary as well, and here's a little pro tip for you. So, there was Themis, I think, is the other big one now because it's a lot cheaper. It had just come on the scene a year or 2 before I took the bar. So, Barbary and Themis both had tables at trying to get people to sign up. So, I walked by the Themis table and I said, "How much does it cost?" It was like $1,000 and Barbary was like 3,400 or something. And so I took the Themis stuff and I walked over to the Barbary table and I go, "Well, why would I pay 3,400? These guys are telling me that they passed just as many people. It's only $1,000." And they're like, "Well, what do you need?" I'm like, "Well, you're gonna have to make it $1,000." And they didn't make it $1,000, but they dropped the price like
Oh
down to
wow!
like 1,700 or something like that. So I ended up getting Barbary for a lot cheaper. And I go, "Okay, well, I'll do that because it was more time tested." Um, and so you can do that. You can negotiate with Barbary and they'll give you the course. So there's that. But the good thing about Barbary was it literally gives you a schedule. I mean, you don't have to think about it. They'll give you the schedule of what you're supposed to do. I was similar to you. So the schedule that I got, it was 7 days a week. Like you studied every single
Oh wow!
day. And so, and I'm religious, so studying on Sunday was not something that I was prepared to do. So I ultimately, I took Sundays off, and, I think that made all the difference. So what I did was I just basically took the 7-day schedule. It was about an 8-hour-a-day schedule, and I ultimately just made it like a 9.5 hour a day schedule for 6 days and studied that way and then took the Sunday off. And what I noticed was when I came back, especially as we got towards the end, like 6, 8 weeks in, that I would come back on Mondays super refreshed and everybody else was just stressed out of their mind. The last 2 weeks, did you study on McGeorge campus?
No, I did. So I was just going to mention that because I forgot that most people did it in person. I did all mine at home, online. I don't even know. You're a little bit older than me, so I don't know if they offered
Yeah.
it, but it may have been brand new when I started. But it was very helpful for me because the online version, the lectures are all recorded, so you can rewind and stuff like that, which is helpful. And also, I would watch them at like 1.5 times speed. Uh,
Mm,
so I was able to get through some stuff that I got through it a lot quicker, and then if I didn't understand something, I can go back and watch it at a slower speed and stuff like that. So
yeah.
I thought that was super helpful. Doing it from home, I thought was helpful because I could, while there was a schedule, I didn't have to follow it exactly, and I can add in additional things. So, like, I did a lot more of the multiple choice practice
Yeah.
because I would finish earlier, with the
Mhm.
lectures, or, for example, with the, essays, a few times I would write out the full essay just to make sure I had the timing right. But then once got through a few of those, I was like, "Okay, I can get through a lot more topics if I just do issue spotting," and I did, like, an outline of an essay,
Mhm.
so I can do that
Mhm.
in, like, a half hour instead of an hour. So I
Yeah.
was able to get through a lot more information that way. Um, but, we might be going a bit in the weeds for people who have no idea what I'm talking about right now.
Right.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I found it, I always took the full weekend off, during that period of time. So I don't remember exactly how I did it, but I was able to smash everything into 5 days a week.
Yeah, and see, I think there's utility in that. I think the other thing of, it was so funny because I was on campus. They did have the video ones, and I started towards the end not going to the live classes, mainly because, they would give you these breaks every hour that were like 15 minutes long, and I didn't necessarily felt like I needed those. So, they were 3-hour classes, so it was like you'd get done 45 minutes early if you just powered through it. So I would just watch it like a movie and take notes. And then I would have that extra time to really start, studying, and I think there's also utility in, like, 4th of July, right? Like, 4th of July, if you do it at a traditional time, um, I broke it up where I said, "Okay, so 4th of July weekend, I'm taking the weekend off, and then I'm gonna power hard for those last 2 weeks before you actually take," because the bar exam is usually, like, the 2nd or 3rd week in July. So it was like, "Okay, this is my point for where I really push hard." And then the last 2 weeks, it was really more me, just looking at the things where I felt like I wasn't strong and really focusing on those subjects rather than the others, and then just trying to memorize outlines. So, there's a lot of ways there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. That's kinda how it is with the bar. You have to just I think it's okay to find the thing that find what works for you and utilize it. Oh, the one thing I'd say about bar prep is don't ever listen to anyone about how they're doing on their on their tests, because I remember there was one guy who will remain nameless. This guy, he would make a point of every time we had like because we always had a time there would always be like intervals where you're required to take one, and then they
Right.
would upload it and you'd get a grade from them. Anyway, I never passed a Barbary, like, practice test according to Barbary. Like, I was, I didn't pass any of them. This guy would go up to me, he's like, "How you doing?" I'm like, "Ah, I didn't do very good on that one." He goes, "Oh, man, I got a 75." And I'm like, "Well, that's, like, perfect." And he goes, "Yeah. Yeah, I did perfect, yeah. I was the perfect every single time." And it was like, "Oh, he didn't have passed the bar." He's still to this day hasn't passed the bar, right? And so, I mean, and that could really mess with your head. By the end of Barbary, at McGeorge, the last 2 weeks, that quad in the between the library and the classes or whatever, it looked like The Walking Dead, just people, like, pacing in that quad, just like, "Oh, I'm not gonna pass, I'm not gonna pass." It's just a mental game, and, you know, so, yeah, I mean, you can get through it. You can get through anything, and, I have all the confidence in anyone who's if you're listening to us talk about it, then you obviously are really, really interested in law school, and, if you are, I think you're gonna do well. So,
Well,
uh
one quick story about the bar. So, uh so backing up a little bit, you mentioned because I took the February bar instead. So you have to do
Mhm.
the study period would fall through like Christmas and New Year's and all that kind of stuff where you don't really want to be studying and there's a whole bunch of
Yeah.
holidays. So that's why I took 3 months off instead of like two, 2.5, like a lot
Mm,
because I knew that there was going to be times when I wasn't going to be following the plan.
mm.
But anyway, I felt like I was really prepared. And then a couple days before the exam, I started getting a little bit stressed out, and I would talk to other people, and then they would stress me out more. And then, like, we're walking into the exam, and people are still studying, and I'm like, man, if you didn't learn it by now, you're not gonna find something in that book 5 minutes before we walk into the test.
Right.
And so, I was getting more and more stressed. And then I get we go in for the first section. And back then it was 3 days, now it's two. But the
Pansies.
what'd you say? Yeah,
Said pansies.
first section, it was 3 essays, I believe, and, like, 2 of them I felt like 2 of them were contracts, and I'm like, "Why would they give me 2 contracts ones?
Yeah.
That's messed up," and then a wills and trusts one, and I'm like, "Oh, man, I'm doing so bad on these essays." So then first day at lunch, and this is not gonna land well with some of your, people in your church and stuff who watch this, but I'm like, "I'm stressed out, I'm gonna go down, I'm gonna get a beer." I went to the hotel across the street, I got 2 beers at lunch, and I went back and finished the test, and then I was on, like, autopilot the rest of the time, the stress went away. But I just needed something to take me out of it because I was too far in my head, and I did really well. Like I felt great for I felt like I did really well on the practical because the practical is like stuff that we do. That's another benefit, by the way, of working while you're in law school. You learn the practical stuff, and and I think they got rid of one of the practical exams in the more recent bar, but there's
Mm.
yeah, there's a practical portion that was like 3 hours long, right? And
Oh,
I
yeah.
felt really confident about that. And the next day was multiple choice, which I felt confident, and then it was kind of all smooth sailing. But yeah, I had a ton of stress, which I'm never really that stressed of a guy. For the first 3 hours, I was like, there is a 0 chance I pass this exam. And then ultimately, you never know how well you did, but I passed, so that was good.
Yeah. So, okay, so I gotta share a story, same story. So I did the same thing, it was 3 days. So you had the 3 one-hour essays and then a performance exam, full day multiple choice, and the 3rd day is just like the first. So, first day in, we do our 3 exams. The first one is just like a straight federal court civil procedure one, international shoe. It was like we'd known that stuff since year 1, so it was like super cake. And then the second one was a criminal procedure one that had to do with the 4th. It looked when I looked at the question, it looked like a 4th Amendment one, but there was an issue that had to do with the 5th Amendment. And they teach you when you do Barbary, they say there's no red herrings. So everything matters, right? So I go, okay, but I looked at the call of the question and it looked like a 4th Amendment issue. So I just wrote, like, I wrote the whole thing like a 4th Amendment issue. And then I put at the end, I just went, there's also a 5th Amendment issue here. But since the call of the question only had to do with the 4th Amendment, like, I'm not going to really address it here. And I left it alone. And then I went to lunch. And then, of course, you start to making the mistake of talking to everybody.
Yep.
So I talked to my buddy about it, and he goes, "No, there was a 5th Amendment issue on the question. The question was this." And I go, "Oh, no." And then I talked to that same guy who I was just telling you about, the guy who was getting the 75s on everything, and I told him about it, and he goes, "Well, if you pass, you'll have this great story about how you passed even though you failed," you know? And I'm like, "I'm gonna murder you." You know what I mean? And and then the best part was is at the end, the 3rd day. So by the 3rd day, I was just toast. I was so tired. And then we had that performance exam, which is a 3-hour exam. And I read the whole question and I was like, I don't even know what they're asking for. It was like this thing where they're like, do a memo on this fictitious business. Like there's this fictitious town in some place, and you need to write this business, recommend how you open a business. And I was like, I don't even know what they're asking for. And I just remember thinking, I was like, I'm gonna fail anyway. So I might as well just keep writing, you know? And I did. I just wrote the whole 3 hours. I don't even remember what I wrote. I just wrote, just kept writing. And I remember coming out of there going, I might as well just start studying for February. Like this was terrible. And I ended up passing, you know? And so, oh, the other thing I'd recommend is if you're a family member of someone taking the bar, please do not throw a surprise party on the day that they're done. Like, that happened, my family threw a
Oh, no.
surprise party for me. I got home and there were all these people, and I just went like, "Thanks for coming, now get out," you
Yeah,
know? I was, like, ready to go to bed, so,
that's
yeah,
fun.
but you know what, guys? I mean, I think in the end, I would say that I feel very, fulfilled by being an attorney, and, uh, the things that are the things just kind of in closing, all the things in my life that I cherish the most are things that were really, really hard to get, and, and law school and a law degree was one of those things, and I'm really grateful for. So, Nolan, any parting parting thoughts on this segment?
No, I think it was, a fun topic. Thanks for inviting me back on. People who are interested in going to law school, if they wanna reach out to me or to you, happy to give more information, but I think if it's something you really want to do, it is, rewarding. So, go ahead and do it.
Uh, Absolutely. All right. Well, for those of you who are listening, thanks for following along. Subscribe, of course, if you haven't already. Nolan, we'll see you next time.
Thanks. See ya.